Thank you, John. I'm an alcoholic, member of the Paris Breakfast Group, and my name is Heidi. And isn't it great to be here, right? I've been so excited about this. It's to be here in person and, to have this opportunity. The whole group of us, we're in this room here to get this going. We're starting this up. And I can't think of a better group of people than alcoholics to get something started, right? I mean, I could certainly get a lot of things started. It was the follow through and finishing off that wasn't too good for me. So I want to thank John for asking me to speak, and also I'm thrilled to be on this panel with Jay because he's a dear friend. I love him to pieces, and I'm looking at this room and seeing so many familiar faces, and it makes me feel even more grateful, if that's possible, for all that I've received from Alcoholics Anonymous. And I also want to thank we're getting this started right now, but there are a lot of members in our fellowship who have been working tirelessly for months and months in the planning of making this weekend happen. And I want us to give a round of thanks to all those people. We truly wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. So I'm going to endeavor to share with you a little bit about my story, because I do feel it's very important that we share our story to qualify, but I also want to leave enough time for sharing what my experience has been with the three legacies, because they're very near and dear to my heart. Now, I'm just going to give you a warning. When I left this morning, I changed my clock to make sure that I would have a watch here, and only to realize it's not working. And so I'm looking at this stopwatch here now, and I may not look at it again. So at some point, John may lean over and just kind of pull on my coattail, and that's okay with me. We're all amongst friends. My dry date is February 7th, 2007. And in the 16 years that I have been with you, it never ceases to amaze me just how powerful this program is. I'm so grateful for the God of my understanding who brought me to the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous by way of another person who was carrying the message to me. And also, the fellowship, my sponsor. I had a great morning this morning picking up my sponsor. We had a little road trip. And, it wasn't always that way when I got up in the morning or I, reached sort of this time of day that I could be saying all the things that I was grateful for. And that's because of this program, God of my understanding, and just such a wonderful fellowship who continue to show me the way. Now, I grew up just outside of Paris, so it is Paris, Ontario, not Paris, France. It's usually a little disappointment for some people. But, and I grew up on a farm and with a loving family, a very loving and Christian family. And I was taught and I was shown principles. And I took my first sip of wine when I was 5 years old, and it all went downhill from there. My drinking went uphill, the principles went downhill, and it was all about me, and it continued to be all about me. I was a very unprincipled person. In fact, somebody came in when we were in the other room and said, are you the other, they said hi to Jay and said, are you the other speaker? And I said, yeah, usually I was the other woman, now I'm the other speaker, right? So this is progress, okay? The principles are coming into my life. From that age of 5, I can honestly say that obsession started for me. I wasn't conscious of it at the time. It was a very innocent sort of thing. I grew up in a European family, and Jay and I identified about that it was pretty harmless to give your child a little sip of wine. My parents made their own homemade wine, and we did that at dinner time. I have older siblings, so I was always watching them get a sip of wine. And because they're a lot older than me, I always just wanted to catch up and catch up with them, hurry up and catch up and be like them. So on one particular occasion, which didn't seem like a big deal to anyone else in my family, but was a big deal in my life, I was offered that sip of wine. And when I had that sip of wine, when it was offered to me, I felt like I'd arrived. And when I took that sip, I was there. I loved it. And I can honestly say that from that point onward, every time we sat down at the dinner table, I would eye my father's glass of wine, waiting for that to be shared with me so I could have another sip. And of course, another sip. As I got older, it was more and more, because I suffer from this disease of more, and I suffer from a great deal of self-centeredness. So it was always about me. And for the longest time, I enjoyed my drinking, didn't have the principles, enjoyed the drinking. It seemed good at the time. And everything just kind of escalates. Unmanageability starts to creep in, but I don't notice it, or I choose to ignore it, and I'm making up excuses as to why my life isn't quite working out the way it should be. And by the time I was 20, I left the country on a little geographical cure for 5 years and traveled around the world. During that time, I'd already taken people hostage, my family, my friends. Now I was, getting into relationships and taking hostages as well. And that continued on for, you could probably say it was about 2 decades of what you could say would be an international hostage-taking crisis. And again, not being very principled. I knew what was right, though. And this is where, as my drinking escalates, that I start to see that duality in me, like I'm doing things that I know are wrong. And I feel terrible inside, but I can't share that with anyone. But if I drink more, I can forget about all that. And so it escalates. And I came back to Canada in 1991, and after a 4-year period of time, found myself pregnant, and I was going to have this child on my own, which I hadn't planned, but that was a circumstance. And then my drinking escalated. And during that period of time, I knew I needed to stop drinking. Like in here, intelligently, it makes sense. I'm having a child. This is a pretty good time to start cleaning up my life. And I can't. And I'm just confused. I'm stunned. Why can't I stop drinking? But for the grace of God, I had a healthy baby boy. He's now 27 and has given me grandchildren. And I'm involved in their lives because of this program, because of the principles that I've been taught by you. And anyhow, when I bought a house when my son was 2. That's when I moved to Paris. I was living out in the country. And before at that point in time, I was living with my brother. We were raising our kids together. And I had moved from drinking in social circles, being the life of the party, to no longer really wanting to be around people or drinking, to drink with. I just wanted to drink to that point where I didn't feel anything anymore. So I became a closet drinker. And it was a walk-in closet, and I had table and chair and my ashtray, and I really did drink in a closet, And that, I could have drank with anybody, but I didn't want to. I just wanted to drink to feel nothing. And when I bought my house and my son was 2 years old, and I'm still there, it's the longest I've ever lived in one place, let me tell you, I put my 2-year-old son, in full-time childcare, and I didn't have a job. And I reached that point where I prefer to spend more time with the bottle than with my boy. I never thought I'd be that sort of mother, and I wasn't very proud of that. I understand that now. I always thought I was a bad mom. I was a sick mom who was making really bad choices. And my drinking continued on for about another 7 or 8 years, and I was trying to stop, but I just couldn't. And I was seeking out, help from counselors and things like that. And I drank every day, and it just continued to be a downward spiral. I would wake up in the morning and say, "Today's the day I'm going to quit for the rest of my life." No pressure. No pressure. You're a daily drinker, and I'm just going to stop for the rest of your life. And then by noon, I'd already be drunk. And I would be beating myself up internally, just saying, "You've done it again. You've messed up again. You can't stick to anything that you stand for or say you're going to do. And, okay, tomorrow I'll quit drinking. So tonight I'm going on a bender." I was on about a 5-year bender. It's a miracle I'm alive. It's a miracle that I didn't lose my son. I'd already taken my parents hostage, who thankfully were involved in taking care of my son when I couldn't take care of myself, let alone him. And then it was in May 29th, 2005, I was taken to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I tell you right now, you had me at hello. You had me at hello. The warm welcome. You just can't undervalue the warm welcome. The greeters that were there at the escalators. I just found this little bit of hope when I received that warm welcome and the laughter and the acceptance. I was not in a good place. I was not in a good place at all. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been going to the meeting. But there I was given some hope. And I continued to go to meetings. And there was still a pull that, if I was crazy when I came into that first meeting. But then I spent a bit of time drinking and going to AA meetings. So that's just a whole level of crazy beyond that, right? But eventually, and that's why we never give up on anybody and just continue to offer hope and that warm welcome and that smile, right? And that's part of the service and giving back. And eventually, like I say, on February 7th, 2007, it was my dry date. It was a whole new journey. When we think about the meetings that I went to from 2005 onwards, especially, the first 6 months in 2007, and I'd go to meetings and I'd hear these steps being read, and that's the first side of our triangle, right? The recovery. And it sounded pretty good. It wasn't too adverse to the God concept or stuff, but there were certain steps that I wasn't really interested in doing. And so I was kind of cherry picking what steps I might do. Like the 9th step was just not an option for me. But I kept coming, and I would hear your stories. That's the power of one alcoholic sharing their story with another. And I think, okay, one of the long-timers would say, well, you don't have to do step 9 right away, eh? There are 8 more steps before it. And so I would start. And the first one, and this is what I love about our 3 legacies, is the principles behind each and every one of us. Me being a very unprincipled person when I came in, way before when I came in, now I have these 36 principles, right? From our recovery, unity, and service, from our steps, our traditions, and our concepts. And the first one, don't worry, I'm not going through all that 36, but the first one, really, the honesty, getting honest, and admitting I was an alcoholic and powerless over alcohol. That's powerful. That in itself is powerful. And, it took me a while to get there, but becoming honest. I was not an honest person. I hadn't been an honest person for years. I was wired to lie. And I met somebody, and as my friend Butch there, I once heard him say, I would lie when telling the truth would serve me better. I would lie when telling the truth would serve me better. And I remember when he said that, I went, oh my God, that is me. That the lie was already in place before I even opened my mouth. So starting with that first principle of honesty and working through the steps in recovery and just realizing what a beautiful program we've been given. I mean, definitely divinely inspired. It gives me goosebumps when I think about, just how incredible and life-changing our 12-step program is. And as I got more into it and doing it step by step, which is something I never did, I always did everything out of order, but actually going through the steps and I'm starting to go through them, and I'm hearing the traditions being read at meetings, and the other side of our triangle. And I'm thinking, what's the deal with this? I just want to get sober. I just want to stop drinking. That was my newcomer mentality. And keep in mind, some of those meetings I was already drinking too. But it took me a while, and suddenly thinking, if you hear something, like we need that repetition. Let me try it again. We need that repetition. And over a while, hearing those traditions, going, there might be something to this. And speaking with others, my home group, my sponsor, and the power of our traditions just amazes me. And I've been to 12 and 12 meetings, and there was one in particular that I went to, and they'd done it in a very different way, where one week they would read step 1, the next week they would read tradition 1, third week they would read step 2, and so on. And suddenly I could see this little thread back and forth between step and tradition. It was just this lovely dance or marriage of, these principles coming together. And then the concepts, the concepts took a little while. And at this point, I was starting to hear things like, and keep in mind, as a newcomer, this had impact on me. And people talking about the 3 legacies is that, we have the steps to prevent suicide. We have the traditions to prevent homicide. And we have the concepts to prevent genocide. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting. How does that work? In a very simplified way. And I mean, there's so much more to it. But it caught my interest, and I found myself wanting to know more. And when I celebrated my second year of sobriety, my group members informed me that I was now going to be the appointed General Service Representative, which was fine. I was happy to serve. I love going to meetings early. I still love it. Staying late, helping with coffee, helping to greet, whatever I can do, even at other meetings. It doesn't have to be my home group meeting. And so I started to get into service. And then out unfolded this beautiful 12-step principled concepts that we have. And just so brilliantly thought out. And what I've been able to do, working with others, working with my sponsors, seeing your example, is to use all of those in everyday life. This really is a program for living that I try to do. Some days are better than other days. But there was a long-timer who I used to spend a lot of time with in early sobriety. His name was Al Kay. And a dear man, I used to sit next to him at our home group meetings. And I used to have a lot of time with him going out for coffee and whatnot. And he always used to say to me, Heidi, this is a program for living out there, and you do what you can here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous to learn all these things and to give back. But you also have a debt to give back to the community. I mean, I sure did. I ripped off a lot of the community for many years. And so it's to give back. And so I got involved in a service organization, international service organization, to be of service too. And I found, oftentimes we would be at board meetings and I'd be talking about the traditions and the concepts and mentioning things that we do in our organization, like spirit of rotation. And board members would go, that's interesting, and they were finding that they were more interested in our steps, our traditions, and our concepts. I have found too with working with my family, using the traditions and the concepts too. Recently my mother had a stroke, 90 years old, and she's home now, but for the grace of God, she's doing much better. But during the last 6 weeks, realizing that not every member of my family agrees on things, and if you don't see things my way, might have a little bit of resentment, You got to have this cheery sort of compromise that needs to be made. These are brilliant things that are outlined in our concepts. So I was able to speak with members of Alcoholics Anonymous when I thought maybe things should be done my way, but it was using the steps, the traditions, and the concepts that really brought back into place that everybody has a right to have their opinion. What is our common purpose? Our primary purpose, to care for my mother and father at this time. And so we were able to come together. These are principles I'm putting in that I've been taught here. My parents taught me this. It just didn't take the first time. But for the grace of God, it has taken now. And I think, wow, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't have the life I have today if it wasn't for God of my understanding, a loving God, and Alcoholics Anonymous. What's it like today? Well, I'm very fortunate. My parents are still alive and they live nearby. And that little boy that I told you about, who 2 years old when I put him into child care, instead of spending time with him, is now 27. And there was a time during my sobriety in his teens. Like, I drank through my teens. I didn't drink through his. I think he was hoping I would drink through his. This program and applying the principles that we get from all three sides of our triangle. We want that balance, to be of service, to work with others, to give back, to be that power of example for people around us, whether it's other alcoholics, who are struggling, or just family members, that we can help out. So when he was 17, 18, it was tough. It was tough. And I know why tigers eat their young. There's like, whoa. And, and it was people in Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor in particular, but I know I see Brad laughing there. I shared stories with him at meetings. But people in Alcoholics Anonymous who had been through difficult times as a parent, right? And could say, Heidi, you're going to get through this. And that was very powerful to me. That gave me so much comfort, so much reassurance. And, and we did get through it. But at one point he said to me, if I ever have children, I promise you, you will never see your grandchildren. And that hurt. That really hurt. And I believed he meant it. And I was accepting that because, I wasn't a good mom. There's a line on one of our stories in the back of the book, Empty on the Inside. It says, I was not a good mom. I've read that paragraph many times. And you never know how things are going to unfold. You know, things did shift, as they do, if we just follow it through and do the things that we're taught to do in our program. And so it was about 3 years ago, my son, who has a house in town and a very lovely partner, had invited me over. It was during COVID, and I hadn't been in their bubble. I was with my parents and with my neighbor looking after their kids. But he invited me over. And you know, even the thinking, it was a Sunday night, he said, want to come over for Chinese? And I thought, I just ate, I'll go another time. Like, back up. Your son has just called and invited you over. Go. And so I went over there, and we had a nice visit and chatted for maybe half an hour. And then my son said, Mom, Kelly has something to tell you. And I thought, maybe they're getting married. And she looked at me and she said, we're expecting. And that was the first person they told. And I was all excited, probably prattled on for about half an hour. And I was super silly excited. And I finally said that, and I said, I want to get up and give you a big hug. But I know I can't, because of COVID. She said, no, we know you're in a bubble. We know you're safe. You can give me a hug. So I get up and give her a hug. And my son's still lying on the couch. And he said, you may as well give her 2 hugs, Mom. And I looked at him, I said, listen, if I can give her a hug, I can give my son a hug. He said, no, Mom, we're having twins. It gets better. It gets better. And I share this because if you are struggling, if you know you're struggling, stick with us. Stick with these, beautiful traditions, steps, and concepts that we have. And it does get better. But you have to work this program. So anyway, that was in May, the start of May. And I was keeping this to myself because I hadn't told anybody else. And finally I said, you've got to tell, my parents, your grandparents. So they did, and they were waiting to tell her mom and her father. But at the end of May, Kelly was going in for an ultrasound. That's COVID because you can't go in with somebody, but I thought at least I could do as driver. So it was her ultrasound was on May 28th. And I said I would take her. So Thursday night, my son called me. He said, Mom, that's really nice that you're going to take Kelly to her ultrasound. I said, well, it's the least I can do. We'll pick up some lunch and eat it when we get back to your house. And my birthday is May 29th. And that was my first AA meeting. I was 38 years old, 2005. And now I can tell you, my son buys me the most amazing cards. Birthday, Mother's Day, Christmas. And he works hard, and not a lot of stores were open at the time. And I said, you probably haven't gotten around to buying me a birthday card yet, have you? And he said, no, actually, Mom, I haven't. I said, that's okay. See, this ultrasound appointment was to determine the gender of the babies. And so what they decided was that they were going to just have the technician write down the gender, put it in the envelope, close the envelope. Kelly would bring it home, and they would open up whenever. And so I said, well, that's okay. You're probably going to have an envelope kicking around tomorrow that you could pass on to me. I meant it jokingly. So I took Kelly to her ultrasound, went back, we had lunch. It was a Friday afternoon. I had to head back to my house to finish off some work. And half an hour later, there's a knock on the door, and I look at the window, and there's Kelly standing there, and I open the door, and she has this grin from ear to ear, and she's holding up the envelope. She said, happy birthday. I got to know the gender before they did. About 3 or 4 weeks later, I was the one to tell them that they were going to have 2 little girls. This is what my life is like today. And I'm so eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. And now our second panelist from the 5th Tradition Group in Scarborough. Please help me welcome J.A.
Hi, I'm an alcoholic, a member of the 5th Tradition Group, and my name is Jay Albee. Hi, everyone. First things first, I'd like to thank John and the committee for giving me the privilege and the honor of speaking here this afternoon. And I do believe it's a privilege and an honor because everything good and decent in my life today is because of Alcoholics Anonymous and a loving God that I found through you people. So I'm very grateful to be here. We talked about service, and Bill Wilson said service is just love with legs, and I see a lot of love in this room, so I'm glad to be here. And I guess this is appropriate. I tell this story quite often, so I didn't do a lot of Zoom, right? And I have nothing against Zoom. A lot of people got sober, but I really love live meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love conferences. I love roundups. I love all the things that we do here. But there's a little story about Frank Sinatra, and I'm a big Frank Sinatra buff, and I love Frank Sinatra. And so I was listening to one of his best friends was telling a story, and it was on his last birthday. And so he was in a wheelchair, and he couldn't eat, right? So there was a nurse feeding him cake, and he had all his closest friends around him. And so a topic broke out, where's the most beautiful place in the world? And they went around the room, and people said Italy, France, and each person gave the place that they had been to. And then the gentleman telling the story said this was the last lesson that he ever taught him. All of a sudden, he lifted his head and he said, you know where the most beautiful place in the world is? Is with your friends. And today and this afternoon and every time I come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm in the most beautiful place in the world. So I'm very, very grateful to be here. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my story, and through my story, the three legacies will be in there, and I'll touch on some other things. But I'm going to start off with, a while ago somebody asked me, Jay, what was the best day of your life? And for me, it was February 6, 2005, and that was the last day I drank. And the loving and powerful hand of God let me feel enough despair that I crawled into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I gazed at a miracle, which I didn't understand. And through you people, the 12 steps, strong sponsorship, meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, you've given me a design for living which works in good times and works in bad times. And the central fact of my life today is the absolute certainty that the Creator's entered my heart and my life and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He's commenced to do the things for me which I could never ever do for myself, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Anyway, my sponsor used to say that there's three things you should do when you get in front of the room is be yourself, do your best, and practice the presence of God, and that's what I'm going to try to do here this afternoon for you people. So my life has been brought to a place of daily surrender. My life has been brought to a place of acceptance, mindfulness, presentness, not attached to yesterday, not attached to tomorrow, but present with breath, with you, and with God. It was never like that. I was always in yesterday, and when things work out tomorrow, I'll be okay. In the literature, it talks about God doesn't make hard turns for those who seek Him. When I'm living present right now in this room, turns aren't hard for me. It's when my mind will get involved, and that's what happened because alcohol had destroyed the love of my family. It had destroyed the love of my friends. It took my ambition. It took my self-respect. It took every love, every dream that I ever had. I had the morals of an alley cat, and my soul was black as the ace of spades. But coming into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and doing all 12 steps and growing in understanding and effectiveness and enhancing the spiritual experience that God has given me, it has erased, it has dissolved a lot of those things. Today I'm a son, today I'm a brother, today I'm an uncle, today I'm a friend, today I have loves, today I have dreams, but when it comes to alcohol, I'm insane, and I don't need 20 questions to tell me I'm an alcoholic. Believe me, once I pick up a drink of alcohol, I have little or no control over the amount that I drink, and my life revolves around the next drink. I have a drink in this hand, and I'm not worried about that drink. I'm worried how am I going to get my next one. And I lie, I steal, I cheat, I manipulate, I do whatever I have to do to get that next drink. drink into me. And one of the definitions of insanity is to believe a lie, something that's not true. And every morning I'd wake up and I'd say, there's no way I'm going to drink this morning. And you could connect me to a lie detector test, and I would have passed that test, because with every fiber in my body and with all my heart, I didn't want to pick up that drink. And then my imagination would be in conflict with my will. And when imagination is in conflict with will, imagination wins all the time. And the switch would go off, and I'd start thinking, what my father did to me 40 years ago, what my brother did to me, what this person did to me 10 years ago, what this person said to me last night, what this person said to me last week. And the next part of my day would be how I'd be getting even with people. And from there, I'd be looking for people to piss me off. And if you didn't piss me off, I knew exactly what you were thinking about me. I was full of hate, anger, resentment. From resentment, I went into self-resentment. From self-resentment, I went into self-pity. And from self-pity, I went into self-hate. I could not stand myself by the time I came into the rooms of alcoholics. I was full of shame, remorse, guilt. I was irritable, restless, and discontent. And the only thing that gives me a false sense of ease and comfort is by picking up a drink. I needed the relief right away, and I understand today that I was suffering from a spiritual malady. And I remember asking my sponsor, what's this spiritual malady? And he said, Jay, right now your spirit is asleep, and this is how you feel when you don't have alcohol or God in your life. I was having trouble with my personal relations. I couldn't control my emotional natures. I was a prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. I had a feeling of uselessness. I was full of fear. I was unhappy. I couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. And that's exactly how I felt. And what's happened to me as a result of the 12 steps is my spirit has awakened. I've had a change in personality through time, sufficient enough for me to recover from alcoholism. I've changed the way I feel, think, attitude, outlook on life, people, place, and things. I'm not the same person that came into the rooms almost 18 years ago, and thank God. Anyway, I grew up in the East End of Toronto, and I'm the oldest of 4 kids. I grew up in an Italian family, and to be blunt, growing up, I hated my dad. My dad always told me I was stupid, I was good for nothing, I never amounted to anything. And as a kid growing up, I believed that. I remember going to school, and the teachers would ask the kids, what do you want to become? And the kids would say, I want to become a doctor, I want to become a lawyer, I want to become a hockey player. I didn't want to become none of those things because I was paralyzed in fear, and I had no self-esteem. And that's what alcohol did for me. I'm not one of these guys. I picked up a drink, I felt taller, I felt better looking, or I felt like I could dance. When I picked up a drink of alcohol, I just felt normal. I needed more alcohol, and I got less and less of that feeling. And I understand today I still drank for the effect produced by alcohol. See, I could come into a room like this, my stomach would be in knots, I'd feel awkward, out of place, and I can go into that kitchen, put a couple drinks into me, and all of a sudden walk out and feel like I belong. And that's why I drink alcohol. Same room, same people. Without alcohol, I cannot stand to be in this room. And I like the effect produced by alcohol. Because I do not drink because of what happened to me as a kid. I do not drink because of my environment. I do not drink because of my mother. I do not drink because of my father. I do not drink because of things I've done to people and the things people have done to me. I drink because I like the effect produced by alcohol, period. Anyway, growing up, I grew up in the East End, like I said, of Toronto, and my dad had a supermarket not too far from here, and it was open 24 hours, and when I wasn't going to school in the summer, I'd work midnights with my uncle, and my uncle's friends used to come around at night, and they were much older than me, and I began to hang around with them, and they had women with them, they had pockets full of money, and I was attracted to these guys. Now, here's the insanity. In the 1970s, my father has $1 million business, and I'm thinking, what a loser. And I'm thinking people respected these people. I understand today people respected a person like my father, and people just feared those people. And going through my inventory, I understand they were my first addiction because I liked the effect produced by them. By the age of 16, I did a lot of things, and I seen a lot of things that no 16-year-old kid should see or do. By the age of 16, I had 2 brand new Cadillacs. I had all the material things one can have. And I'm not telling that to impress you. I'm telling that February 7th, 2005, I was sitting in treatment. My cousin and my uncle had to bring me socks and jeans because alcohol had stripped me of everything. The big shooter with the Cadillacs here I am breaking into my mom's home. 2 days before I went to treatment, I broke into my mom's home and I stole her checkbook. My mother, who I would jump in front of a car for, I would tear out my heart for my mother, and you put a drink of alcohol on me, and I do not care. I'm like a bulldozer. I'll bulldoze over anybody get that next drink to me. And I understand today, which I didn't understand then, that I was beyond human aid. See, no matter how much I love my mother, I can't stop. My brother telling me, hey, if you pick up another drink, you're not going to be able to see your niece. I'm on bail. Part of my bail stipulation is I cannot consume alcohol. And you know what I do. You know what I do, because I'm beginning to develop that particular mental twist, and I have a strange mental blank spot. See, I can't bring with sufficient force suffering and humiliation of a week, a day, or a month ago. I was without defense against the first drink, and I didn't even know it. Anyway, the first trouble that I did get into alcohol, I used to hang around the social club on the Danforth, and I got drunk one night. I was being loud, obnoxious, and they said, Jay, you should go home and sleep it off. And I called a friend of mine, and we were driving along Woodbine and Girard in the east end of Toronto, and we hit a guy and we killed him. And I'll never forget, he came into the glass, and I was covered in all little pieces of glass. And the first thing that came to my head, and I don't use foul language from the podium today, but the first thing that came to my head was, what a so-and-so. He ruined my pants, self-centered to the extreme. And not till I was about 3 months sober, I remember it was Mother's Day, and I couldn't look at my mom. These feelings were starting to pop up, and I remember phoning my sponsor and saying, what's the matter with me? And he said, Jay, your whole life, your feelings and your emotions, you've been boxing them up inside, and right now, you're like a ravine full of junk and dirt. And as you go along, you do your 12 steps, you're going to pick up that junk and that dirt, and if anything falls in there, you're going to pick it up and take it out. And he was talking about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason why I couldn't look at my mom, his mother, his father, his brothers, and his sisters were across the street in a restaurant. His father came running across the street. He's holding his son. Blood's coming out of his mouth. Blood's coming out of his ears, and he's crying, son, please don't die. And that was my thinking. Anyway, I end up opening my own social club around the Greenwood and Danforth, and I thought I'd arrived. There was an attempt made on my life. They threw a bomb through my front window, and by the grace of God, I got away, and it was in all the newspapers, the news that I was known to police, me and my partner. And here's the kicker, right? My whole life revolves around what you think about me. So what did I do? I went and opened up across the street from where they bombed me, because I couldn't show you that I was scared. Meanwhile, I was paralyzed in fear. It could have been 1 out of 1,000 people that did it, and the only solution I have to that fear is by picking up a drink. And here's the sad part. I remember listening to my sponsor speak. See, my whole life revolves around what you think about me. I don't care if you live or die. It really doesn't make a difference to me. And at home, I have my family's approval. And I'm a user and taker of people. The people I use and take from the most is my family, because I'm fortunate. I come from the type of family. My mother was an enabler. My mother loved a son the way a mother should love a son. And she kept giving, and I kept taking. She kept giving, and I kept taking, till finally I broke her heart, and she said, Jay, you're no longer welcome here. And for my mother to do that, you don't know what it takes, because I'm Italian, and we have a lifetime membership at home. So, what do you call it? So anyway, I'm going to take you right near the ending. What happened was one of my best friends was on the run from the police, and I used to go quite a bit back and forth to Florida, and he was in Florida, and I went to see him down there, and I asked him if he wanted to go out for a drink, and he said, Jay, I don't drink anymore now. I don't know if he was in a 12-step program or not, but what happened was he ended up coming back to Toronto. He ended up going to prison, and by the time he got out of prison, a short time later, he was a mess again. And I used to be in the bar business, and like I said, I used to go quite a bit back into Florida. So he had opened up a bar, and I came home on a Saturday, and he asked me if I wanted to go out for a drink, and I told him that I'd meet him. But I'd been up in Florida 3-4 days, I don't know, drinking and using alcohol in other forms. And what happened is I fell asleep, and I got a phone call from my sister the next morning that he had hung himself. His brother found him hanging, and a short time later his kid found his brother with a needle in his arm, overdosed. And you talk about explosion. What happened to me was I imploded. I began to go crazy, and I began to isolate from everybody. And my partners thought it'd be best for me to go up to Markham, Ontario. It's a small town, and they thought it'd be better. It was quiet, and then up there it was worse because on the top was like a cafe, and on the bottom was like a banquet hall, and I'd just go downstairs and drink myself to oblivion. And what happened is now I went to see a doctor. I'll be walking along the street, my body would just shut down, blood was coming out of everywhere possible it could come out of, and I went to see the doctor, and the doctor asked me if I was drinking or using drugs. Of course, I'm a liar. I said no, and he wanted me to go do some tests. Now, on my 4th step inventory on my fear list is cancer. My mother's a cancer survivor. I lost all my grandparents to cancer. I've lost aunts and uncles, cousins, young and old, to cancer, and in my head, from the paranoia, I began to convince myself that I was dying from cancer, and I began to isolate from everybody. And what happened was my father, who I hadn't talked to in 12 years, came to my house, and he said, you know, son, I love you. Please get some help. And I told him to get the F out of my house, because it was all his fault. If you had a father like mine, if what happened to me happened to you, you'd be the same a victim. And my poor dad was supposed to leave to go on holidays, and he didn't want to leave because he didn't know if he'd find me dead or alive. And what happened is, from the paranoia, I ended up going to Sunnybrook Hospital, and I walked in there, and here's the sad part, right? I brought my mother with me, and I brought my best friend, and I walked into that hospital, and I said, you know, start the cancer treatment on me, because I believed, I was convinced I was in psychosis. I believed that I was dying, and they said, like, Jay, you know, my best friend, my mother's crying, my best friend saying, like, listen, you're not dying, and I couldn't comprehend anything. And this is February 6, 2005, and that was the last day I drank. And what happened was, it was Super Bowl Sunday, February 6, 2005. And my partners were starting to get fed up. I wasn't showing up for work. Money was starting to go missing. Other things were starting to go missing. And they said, we're going to have a little party. And it's my remember when, and I know today it was tough love. And I walked in, and I got beat by pool balls. And I was lying on the floor, and the relief went through my body. You know, I thought I was going to die, and I said, you know, thank God I don't have to live like this anymore. And they picked me up, and they cleaned me up, and they said, you know, Jay, you better get some help, or next time you won't be so lucky. And my partners weren't the type of people you messed around. One had been in Kingston Penitentiary for shooting a guy 5 times in the head, and the other had been in the penitentiary for trafficking cocaine. As they were beating me, they were crying, and they said, Jay, why can't you stop? And I gave the first honest answer that I had given in a long time. I said, I don't know. And the only reason I believe I'm here today is because they knew me as a kid, and they knew my uncle, because I've seen a lot worse happen to people for a lot less. Now, for years, I said, how could my friend Tony hang himself? And here I am in the middle of my living room with a gun in my mouth, wanting to blow my head off. And I never want to forget the loneliness, the despair, the hopelessness I felt that day. I never want to forget that. And when I used to speak, I used to say I was too much of a coward to pull the trigger. And there was a gentleman in my old home group, George, and he said, Jay, it pisses me off when you say that. He said, do you think maybe it wasn't an act of providence? And looking back on my journey, I understand what happened to me. I was touched by the unseen hand of God. See, I didn't find God in religion. I didn't find God in a church. I didn't find God in a church basement. Actually, I didn't find God at all. God found me on the middle of that floor on February 6, 2005. And this is what he said. Jay Albee, that's enough. And here's what I'm going to do for you. If you do for you what's possible, I will do for you the impossible. On February 7th, 2005, a loving God separated me from alcohol. I was a full-blown alcoholic addict. I was suffering from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If I live to be 100 years old, I'll never look as old as the day that I walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He took me from that scrap heap, and he placed me before you here tonight, recovering from a hopeless condition of mind and body with some dignity, experiencing the glory of God. I get to give it back to newcomers, and I walk with my head high and shoulders square because of the power of God that I found in the sacred rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. On February 6, 2005, my life revolved around the next drink. Every time I pick up a drink, the craving intensifies, and I'm never satisfied, and I have a mind that wants to kill me. My mind insists that I pick up that drink, no matter the consequences of the day before, the month before, the doctors, the jails, the institutions, my mind insists that I pick up that drink. And I believe that day, a loving God, He planted a mustard seed of willingness to change. And with a mustard seed of willingness, you can move a mountain. And that was the day I didn't want to live that life or die. And God rocking me to where I am tonight. And that's where my recovery started. My best friend and my sister came to my house and they said, listen, will you accept help? And I said, yeah. Now, here's the thing. If there's anybody here that's new, you don't want to be here, that's okay. This was the last place that I wanted to be, believe me. And I hope I never have a bigger spiritual experience than I did February 6, 2005. How can you take someone for over 20 years I could not stop drinking and I haven't had a drink or any mind-altering substance since that day? And you know how it happened? A meeting. We recover from the 12 steps. A meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody practicing their principles in their home, occupations, and affairs changed my life forever. And the treatment center I went to was a 12-step based treatment center. I haven't got time to get into that. And they took us to meetings every day. We did 12 and 12, a big book all day. They talked about sponsorship. At night they used to drive us to meetings. And I got out of there, and this is where my life changed. I've never been the same person since that day. And there was 2 long-time members at the Bellamy Group. That was my first home group. I lived down the road. Andy S. and Ron D. Andy was a founding member, and I walked in, and we have slogans, and there was a slogan, keep an open mind. Andy says, you know what that means? I said, no, it means keep your mouth shut. If you don't understand, ask, because you got nothing we want. And I'm like, okay, buddy, no problem. And he used to say, it's going to take you 5 years before you know your name. And in my head, I'm saying, man, this guy must have been a real drunk. It took him 5 years to know his name. But after a while, I understood what he meant, right? And the newcomers would come in the room, and I'd say, you know, how's your day going? And they'd start complaining to me, and I put my arm around them and say, you think you're having a bad day? See that guy over there? It took him 5 years before he knew his name. You're having a great day. And I understand what he was teaching me. See, selfish and self-centeredness is the root of my problem. And when I'm listening to you, I'm not thinking about me. I'm out of self. And if I don't get rid of that, it's not going to hurt me. It's going to kill me. And that's what he's teaching me. And this gentleman, Ron D., changed my life forever. I've never been the same since that happened. How much time did I have? So what happened was he said, son, if you want guaranteed sobriety, you got to get on your knees in the morning, ask God to keep you sober today, contact somebody in AA, and at night give thanks. And you've had your last drink. And that was a Monday. Now, hear how God begins to work in my life, right? This isn't a religious program. It's a spiritual program. So religion means you must believe in God. Spirituality means it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're willing to believe in something. So this is how God begins to work for me. On St. Paul Church on Bloor Street, they used to have a noon meeting there, and I walked into that meeting. The church was under renovation, and I was starting to get the compulsion that I wanted to drink. And I walked down into the church and I said, is there a meeting here? And they said, I'm sorry, we don't have meetings here. And I remember what that gentleman told me. And I walked up and I walked into the church and I got on my knees and I said, God, whoever you are, whatever you are, please help me. And I used to get days where I used to feel like putting my head through a wall. And I go into public washrooms and I get on my knees and I'd say, God, whoever you are, whatever you are, please help me. And I understand today, see, that day I wasn't looking for God. I found the need for God. In our literature it talks about at certain times the alcoholic has no mental defense against the first drink. Neither he nor any human being could provide that defense. That defense, not should, not could, must come from a higher power. And that day, without even knowing it, I began to build a defense against the first drink. And what happened is, I haven't got time, I guess, to get into it, but what happened was I end up 3 months, and this is what my recovery looked like. And I should talk to this is probably the pivotal part in my recovery, and I never said it. So, it talks in our literature, elimination of alcohol is just a beginning. A much more important demonstration of our principles lie before our respective home, occupations, and affairs. And what happened is, this is how God began to work for me right? Now, I had 3 friends. We had a big men's meeting in Toronto, and I walked into this men's meeting, and the guy speaking, right, was a friend of mine. 18, 19 years before, he was at the social club. He was drunk, and the last time he drank, his wife was there, and I had to help him to the car. And in 18, 19 years, he's only been there twice. And then I look over, there's a friend of mine, Michael. Michael had been charged for first-degree murder. He had spent half his life in the penitentiary, and he was there. And I look over, there's a friend of mine, Carmen. Carmen, I knew him as a kid. I knew his father. I knew his brother. And all 4 of us knew each other, and nobody knew that they were going to be there. And for the first time in alcohol, I can relate to Bill's story. There was something different about them. They had that glow in their skin. Their eyes were shining. And I wanted to talk horror stories, and they said, Jay, we don't live like that anymore. And you know what they said to me at the end of that meeting? They said, Jay, I love you. And I cringed because I couldn't believe that anybody could love me. And what happened is, like, Michael gave me the keys to the kingdom. And this is what he said, Jay, this is what I want you to do. He says, I want you to go to meetings, and I want you to identify with the way people feel, the way people think, the way people drink, their progression. In alcoholism, they're drinking for oblivion. And if you can relate, maybe it's a beginning of belief and it's a beginning of hope. And what happened to me was, through your shame, through your remorse, through your guilt, my spirit began to connect with your spirit. And this is the fellowship of the Spirit, not the spirit of the fellowship. And 2 things happened to me. The first thing is that I learned a new language, and it's the language of the heart. And if it's not the language of the heart, my dear friends, it's not Alcoholics Anonymous. And the second thing that happened to me was I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. I truly, truly love Alcoholics Anonymous with all my heart. See, I know I've been given a gift, and that gift was the gift of hopelessness. See, I never forget on February 6, 2005, how I felt on the middle of that floor. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've entered the world of the Spirit. I'm safe and protected. See, whatever's going to happen to me, I'm going to be okay. Because Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't just save lives, it transforms lives. So you can go out and save and transform other people's lives. And what happened to me, I'll never, never forget. Like, I just fell in love. I love recovery, and I haven't got time to get into it, but it's just like this, right? I keep saying that, but here's how it is. It says modem to modem, face to face. Alcoholics Anonymous is the language of the heart in all its simplicity, right? So it's just like this. I have a grade 8 education. I'm not you know what I mean? I'm not the brightest person, but I'll tell you this. It's just this simple, right? You'll hear, I went to 10 treatment centers, 5 treatment centers. I'm in and out for years. And the core of the story is always the same. Finally, I got a sponsor. I did the steps to the best of my ability. I'm honest. I do service. I have a home group. I go to meetings. I pray. And they stay sober. And you hear the flip side. You know, I stopped going to meetings. I stopped talking to my sponsor. And the most important thing is I stopped working with other alcoholics. That's the main thing for me. From day one, people say, I hate this when people say, after the first year, the work starts now. No. From the very start, we start, right? And I've been doing the same thing for the last 18 years. So I'm just going to close with this story. So, so this is what God and Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me, right? So, like I said, I have a grade 8 education, and I don't say that because I think I'm stupid. I tell you that because look at the power of AA, what it's done for me. And I love working with alcoholics and addicts, right? And so when I was about 5 years sober, where I went to treatment, they called me and they said, Jay, would you come down here and volunteer? So I started to volunteer, and then a few years later, a guy sponsored opened up a treatment center in Aurora, and they asked me, would you come down here? And that's what I do today. I do 6 hours of Big Book a day. I take people that are there for a bit. I take them through 4 steps. I do groups, and before COVID, we used to do workshops. So about I'm not good with dates. I don't know. It could have been 6, 7 years ago. Butch and Eric came out to do a workshop at the center, and we had a beautiful boy, 27 years old, from Calgary. And it was a great day, and he asked Butch, do you know somebody in Calgary that maybe you can give as a contact? So we got him a contact, and it was a great day of recovery, right? And what happened was it was a holiday Monday, and what happens is I round the people up for breakfast in the morning, and everybody comes down except him. And I go upstairs, and I look in his room, and the room is empty, and the bed's made, right? So I go to the washroom, and the washroom door's locked. And you know when you know? And I break down the door, and I find him dead on the ground. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death, and it's not over there. His wife flies in from Calgary, his mother was from Newmarket, and they want to talk to me. And they asked me, the wife asked me, say, Jay, they wanted to know how I found him, and I had to tell them exactly how I found him. And his wife said to me, Jay, why would he do that? And I gave the same answer that I'd been given when I was getting beaten by pool balls. I don't know. I know one thing, God doesn't love me more than he loves him. But I know another thing, when the compulsion to drink hits me, nobody's stopping me. And she said he was selfish. I said, he wasn't selfish. He suffered from the most deadliest illness known to mankind, alcoholism. Would you call somebody who had cancer selfish? And see, tonight, we don't need to look further for utopia. We have it right here, right now, in this room. But underneath alcoholism, there's a deadly earnestness. Because this afternoon, there's a little girl with no father. There's a mother with no son. And there's a wife with no husband. Right? And that's the truth of alcoholism. So anyway, I'm going to say this. If you're new, I'm going to close with what my sponsor used to close with. And I mean this with all my heart. If you're new, you're coming back, or you're struggling, please stay a little longer, try a little harder, and maybe the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous can happen to you. Maybe something you'll read, something you'll hear, somebody you'll see, and you can go on and live meaningful, purposeful lives like so many of us do. Just keep coming, because we're glad to see you. May God richly bless all of you. Thank you.